Hello. Today I'm starting a new series of the interviews where in English language we'll be talking about pretty much everything. But the main idea is that some of my guests will be from the United States of America, Americans. Some of them will be Georgians or from other countries who have experience from America. They'll tell us their adventures, their stories related to both either America or Georgia. The bottom line is the idea is to strengthen relationships between our countries and get to know more about each other, get to know more about culture, society, and to become better friends. So my first guest in this series will be my friend, he's American, Sid White, who has an incredible story. He's from Los Angeles, but in 1995 something very important happened in his life that forever connected him and his family to Georgia. So let's meet Sid and find out what happened. Hello. So Sid, welcome to
Thank you.
beautiful Bioli, and well, you're my first guest. I'm honored to have you as my first guest. I'm starting a series of interviews. So these talks will be just, talks from the heart. Just the conversations that will last forever. And,
Perfect.
let's start.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. So,
Let's do it.
So, where were you born?
Ramaz, I was born in a small village in the state of Pennsylvania in northeastern U.S. I would call it small village Amish adjacent. And what does that mean? If you know a little bit about the Amish religious sect, you know that they don't have electricity, they don't have indoor plumbing, they don't use gasoline machinery to do their farms. I lived adjacent, which to me meant we used electricity, but we didn't have indoor plumbing. But that's where I grew up, that's where I was raised. I came from there with very kind of strict morals and values, and then moved from that small village out into the country of U.S.
And yeah, the next question, follows up. Did you stay there? Where did you move?
No, I didn't. The folks in that part of the world, generally speaking, have a high school education and then they go into farming. A lot of my friends dropped out of school at 13 years old and went to work on a farm. Instead, my parents had a dream to send their children to university, which I was very lucky to receive a scholarship at a local college, and then was educated there, and then moved from a bachelor's education into a master's degree, going to Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in upstate New York. So I got my master's degree there. I got a job the day after I graduated in Troy, New York, and so that was my first out of Reinholds, Pennsylvania, where I grew up, place to live and work.
And yeah, well, now you're retired.
I am retired.
But what did Sid White do for a living?
Okay, I was an economic development professional. Started there as economic development manager in Troy, New York, before moving to California and the like. Economic development is looking at ways to create jobs, looking at ways to create public infrastructure. One of my specialties over the years was doing feasibility studies for sports arenas and convention centers. On the other hand, one of my most fulfilling jobs was as an economic development project manager for LA County, where I worked with immigrants coming into Los Angeles, trying to help them create a place for themselves to live, get them some quality jobs. I formed 5 chambers of commerce, for instance, for folks around LA, and worked in some of the toughest neighborhoods of LA, trying to give folks a better way of life.
Wow, very impressive. How and where did you meet your wife, Anne?
I met my wife, Anne, back in Troy, New York. She was there to spend some time with her cousin. We met over a cocktail or two, and she decided she was going to stay in Troy, New York. Her profession is as a potter, as an artist. So if I said she was a professional, she would say, no, I'm an artist. So I met her there. We spent 3 or 4 years there and then moved to California at that time, stayed a little bit in her hometown, but then moved into Santa Monica for my first kind of public economic development job in California.
Great, and that brings us to a main story that connects you and your family to our country, to Georgia.
Absolutely.
And the question is, what did inspire you and Ann to pursue international adoption in 1995?
Well, if you sort of follow my professional career, it's almost a matter of fact is I was so attuned with developing that career. My wife and I turned 45 years old, and we had, I don't want to say forgotten, but we hadn't focused on children. And then at a moment together, we were looking at houses, and I said, well, wait a minute, we're buying a house suitable for children. What are we going to do about that? At that point, we decided we were 45 and wanted to look at international adoption. A lot of things were happening in the world. There were children being displaced, kind of sort of abandoned because the Soviet Union was breaking apart. So we looked at this part of the world. My wife looked at South America, Korea, Vietnam, China, and then the sort of former Soviet Union countries as well. We landed with, after, my God, she did so much research, but we landed with a group located in Washington, D.C. They were called Cradle of Hope. And they had a very significant Russian adoption program and really didn't, at our first sort of meeting with them, talk about Georgia at all. So the conversations were moving towards Russia, and we put together a dossier in Russian and the like, and we were pretty quickly approved because we had the wherewithal to provide for a couple of kids. We decided we wanted to adopt two and have them kind of similar in age and somewhere between the ages of 5 and 6 years old. Tying that all together, we're at home one day and I get a note, a letter in the mail with 2 Polaroid pictures. And those pictures were of 2 orphans in Kutaisi orphanage. They had been abandoned at birth, and you know, if you kind of sort of remember a little bit about the international adoption process, a lot of times the children are dressed in beautiful little pixie dresses, clothes, and ribbons in their hair, and the Russian adoption process at that time was known for that. These kids were not dressed in wonderful clothing. You could tell immediately that they were in an environment that was rough, if not just rough around the edges, very rough. And we looked at them and almost in a spiritual way said, these are our kids. This is what makes sense for us to move forward. And again, spiritually, it was a decision that made a lot of sense for us.
As I know, you weren't able to come to Kutaisi then. That's
right. That's right. You know, it was difficult times. It was the dark times in Georgia as we understood it at the time. So the plan was put together. We adopted both the girls, went through the courts in Kutaisi, Tbilisi, and at the national level as well in Georgia. They were issued their Georgian passports. We were issued our birth certificates for them, or their birth certificates listing us as parents. So all that was taking place, and they were our kids under the conventions, international adoption conventions, but we couldn't get into Georgia to pick them up. So at the last minute, we decided we would arrange to meet them in Moscow, which we did. And they came out on, I believe, a Georgian Airways plane, not the first time, but the second time. So that whole story about waiting and anticipation and nervousness until they met us at the domestic Russian airport. They came off the plane, they were dressed in our clothing, which we had sent for them, and knew that we were their newest parents, and they were happy kids.
So for the viewers who don't know, I'll explain. Kutaisi is the second largest city here in Georgia. It used to be, you know, ancient Georgia's capital too.
Yes.
And so in 1995, Georgia was in a turmoil. We had a civil war. We just broke off the Soviet Union. It was corruption, mafia. It was unbelievably dangerous and not safe place. I lived here, I remember, and so that's where you got your children from. And can you describe a moment you met girls first time?
The moment we met first time, they came running off the plane, and they ran towards us. I mean, what a freaking moment. You know, it was like they were in our clothes. They came to us. They stood there. I put one of the children on my shoulders, and the other child, Elizabeth, actually stood below. She was a little bit more shy. Rebecca was a little bit rambunctious at the time, but the folks who brought them out to us sort of took a step back, and we immediately sort of started establishing a bond. And it was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I have pictures of my two daughters, our two daughters, standing there at the airport, one on my shoulders and one standing below.
What were their Georgian names?
Salome, I can't pronounce the last name, I won't try, and the other was Nana.
Salome and Nana, and what is their American names?
The American names are Rebecca Salome White, and Elizabeth's name is Elizabeth Nana White.
Beautiful. So you took them to Los Angeles.
We did.
And what challenges did you face raising two girls from totally different culture in Los Angeles?
Wow. I'll say one note. Los Angeles is incredibly diverse. So believe it or not, there were resources there for us to take advantage of. And the girls didn't speak English. We didn't speak Georgian. But in order to sort of facilitate our combinations, we learned 30 or 40, at the most 40 Georgian words. You know, come, sit, bathroom, sleep, and whatnot. But they were both 5 and a half. So when they set foot in California, we took 6 months because they had really never seen a car. They were scared of birds. They were scared of dogs. They had stories told to them in the orphanage about wolves and Russian history. And I mean, it was incredible. Slowly we put them out in the environment with us, supermarkets. One of the things that we did right away, and this is a credible story, was as the doctors who did their medical work said, take them and let them run free. Because frankly, they had been in a very constrained environment. We took them to large soccer fields in Los Angeles, and I would let them run. And they would just go and go and go until I was, at that age even, knew I had to run like heck to go get them because they were free and footloose. The funniest story was when they realized that they had hair that would grow. And I say that because in the orphanage, their heads were shaved because of conditions, lack of a better term. So as they were running one day in the wind, I remember Elizabeth sort of looking up and feeling a little bit of hair coming down on her forehead. And what a moment. To look at these girls and know that was one of the things that they could feel in life that made them feel free. Anyway, you stop me if I get too winded, but
it's very interesting.
The first thing then was to go to kindergarten, and we put them in a Montessori school first of all, which is a very gentle kind of school where they focus on emotional issues and the like that are happening, and dress them up and give them their little backpacks just like the kids do. Took them to that school. That was their kindergarten years, and then we took them to an elementary school, public, of course, and here's where I tie in the diversity in LA. So they were starting to speak a little bit of English, and we didn't push that on them. They went to school, and because LA is so diverse, they went to an English as second language school, but the first language was Spanish. So they came home speaking Spanglish / Georgian, and then we took, again, this takes care of a resource, or we used a resource. The school district said, you need to put them in an English-only school. So, but that's part of LA. That's part of an international life. We put them in an English-only school, and then they started to develop their English skills.
And I mean, you were there when you brought them to Los Angeles. Can you remember, like, how were they different from American children?
They were they were much more shy. They were apprehensive, because the world to them was an incredibly new and very different place. And if there's one thing that stood out in our relationships, it was that they had absolutely no idea. So they had 5 years without, frankly, and I say this brings a tear to my eye, without much stimulation at all. So they really didn't get to play. They weren't free. And the orphanage workers did the best they could. But when our kids came to LA and they had the plethora of food and options and having to make a decision, here's a great point. We were counseled, and we would do, you know, people, social workers and things would help us, or therapy, whatever the term is, and they would say, you know, these children have never had to make a decision on their own. And this was kind of foreign for us. So they would get up in the morning and they'd have to dress for school. And, you know, Americans, we have choices, and we'd say, oh, what would you like to wear today? And maybe lay out 2 or 3 options for them. That was very difficult. They sort of froze because they never had to do it before. In the orphanage, every decision was made for them. So that was probably the most pointed aspect of their growing with us. And then, of course, as they became more and more acclimated to the environment, then, believe it or not, they wanted the choices, and it was fun for them. And you know, they just grew up in that environment.
Can you share some of your favorite memories of raising them in Los Angeles?
Oh my God. Okay, so typical LA. Favorite memories are taking them to Disneyland.
Of course.
They went crazy. We had annual passes to Universal City. We had annual passes to the LA Zoo. We would take them there weekends to, you know, meander amongst the animals and have lunches. Dodger game, fantastic. Those are all the iconic Los Angeles experiences. My favorite, of course, is Venice Beach. and if you know Venice is a circus environment. Yes. And I would love to take the girls down there. My wife, not so much. She thought I was corrupting them. But those are all the memories of childhood.
You went and kept Georgia alive for the girls.
Yes,
Why?
we did. You know, I thought it was the right thing to do. Okay, you know, even in my old age, I become more and more a globalist. And knowing the different cultures and the like, and keeping their Georgian alive and the like, they always had a finger in their history. And they could tell their story to their classmates, or they could tell their story to their friends. And we kept that alive as best we could. And you know, coming back to Georgia when they graduated after university, that was a big deal.
Yeah, that's my actually next question is, in 2016,
yes,
you came, first time for you two,
yes, absolutely,
came to Georgia,
yes,
together with Elizabeth.
Yes.
What was the experience like?
Absolutely amazing. So first of all, you know, I'll put the context out there that for me, I'm an adventurous traveler. My wife is not. She's a delicate traveler. So I came with Elizabeth without any plans at all. Elizabeth and I arrived at Tbilisi. And by the way, this was following her graduation. So I gave her the choice. Do you want to go to the quote-unquote motherland and check it out, see where you came from? So we got off the plane at Tbilisi International. We took a taxi to Courtyard Marriott. That was our first stay. We got a room. They were the kindest people in the world. They knew a little bit that we were coming, gave us a room at 3 a.m. when the flight comes into Tbilisi. The next day, we just walked around Tbilisi and explored as much as we could. The following weeks, we were here for three and a half weeks, I rented a car. And we drove around Georgia with no real plan other than to visit Zugdidi, where she was born, before she ended up in New York.
You mean Zestaponi?
I'm sorry, Zestaponi. I got my daughters mixed up.
I'm from Imereti, so I remember where she was born.
Exactly. So Elizabeth Zestaponi, Rebecca Zugdidi.
Yes.
And I've driven to both. So we drove to Batumi first, which was amazing. Put a toe in the Black Sea. Then drove to Zestaponi, and then drove from there, stayed a couple of places back to Tbilisi. That was our first sort of meandering about Georgia. And, you know, stories. I tell the story about our little bit of a trip to Kutaisi, and of course the orphanage was gone, and you know, the memories of the people there are not intact enough to know where things were. But the folks in Kutaisi helped us and talked to this person and that person. The funniest story is Elizabeth and I were introduced to the local school, local elementary school. And we walked in, and the teachers and the administrators were just beautiful people. But I could tell Elizabeth walked into the classroom and looked about, and I could tell going through her brain was, wow, this could have been me. This could have been me instead of Disneyland and LA and all of what I experienced. So that was a moving moment as well.
Yes, I'm sure it was, and yeah, it makes perfect sense. As I know, you made Georgia your second home.
I did.
What made you decide to buy an apartment here, and how is your Georgian life?
Georgian life is incredible, and I'll tie it back to my very first visit with Elizabeth in 2016. I'm kind of, as I said, I'm kind of adventurous. So I walked into the office of the Economic Development Group in Georgia. It was Enterprise Georgia at that time, where it was the Tourism Administration. And the Office of Economic Development Professionals was populated by 20-somethings. They had graduated from university. And they were doing what they could to expand Georgia's economy and tourism and, you know, and whatever. I sat down and talked with one of the young ladies, and she was incredible. She and I spoke the same language. I had the vocabulary, I had the professional expertise. She managed to get me an invitation to the United Nations World Tourism Organization conference that was being held that year in Georgia. I attended that, and lo and behold, I attended the Prime Minister's dinner and met people from all around the world that were interested in tourism. In addition, that conference sort of set the stage for me to meet a lot of economic development professionals, not only from around the world, but from Georgia as well. And once they knew me, I got invitation after invitation after invitation to the conferences in Georgia, and I started attending as many as I could. As I got more and more involved with Georgian life, I fully retired in the United States. And the answer to your question is kind of, sort of, why not? But I'm 73, 4 years old, and the energy that was coming from those young people who cared so much about Georgia and were so focused on how to make Georgia a better place, economic development-wise, was invigorating. And, you know, I went home and had a conversation with my wife, and she said, you know, you're kind of sort of bored here in California because you're retired and your job is one that you know, is well established compared to Georgia. And I love the Georgian energy. Ergo, bought a flat. My wife did not like walking up and down the hills from Solalaki, where I had rented one, so we bought our flat right across from Liberty Square metro station. We love it. I love it.
Well, I'm glad you love it. And my next question is, well, after getting to know Georgia and Georgians so well, do you find more Georgia in your girls today?
Certainly, yes. Certainly in Elizabeth, and she sort of takes the information she has and gives it to her sister as well. All right, so Elizabeth now is in her 30s. She has a boyfriend. and they're going to be visiting in January. So she's sort of re-looking at her roots, and she's been here several times since 2016 and spends time with me and my wife as well. But this is the first trip where now we have another person in the play. We have her boyfriend who will come with us, and you know, they're going to spend some time, and she is so I guess I'll use the word enamored with being able to show this new person where she came from as well.
I remember a couple of years ago when my father, I, and my brother visited your place in Ventura. We right there and then we taught Elizabeth Emiratian song, and we actually sang together.
Yes,
there's a video of it, as I remember.
I do have a video of that.
There you go.
Incredible.
So yes, there is some Georgia in her, and I'm glad she loves Georgia.
Yeah, I'm definitely. I just add to that one thing. When we first came over in 2016, we walked the streets of Tbilisi, and as we got home to California, she said to my wife, she said, "Mom, they all look like me." There you go.
Well, that's great. What advice would you give to parents who are considering international adoption today?
It's the most amazing experience from so many aspects. It gives you the extra sort of feeling of doing something that's good for the world, as opposed to just the U.S. It expands your horizons. It has been the most magnificent experience of our lifetime. Without a doubt. I would highly recommend it to anyone who was doing an adoption per se. And in the meantime, you know, there are organizations out in the world of folks who adopt internationally, and take a step forward and do it if you can.
You know, you mentioned before that girls were very surprised when you gave them a choice. They didn't have to choose before. They couldn't choose. And today, you know, from today's perspective, to, you know, looking at the world, looking at Georgia per se, what does freedom of speech and freedom of expression mean for you?
Wow, great question. I mean, Georgia's perspective, my perspective, I think the U.S., one way or another, has taken that for granted. You know, we need to, in the U.S., first of all, learn how difficult it is to maintain that freedom of speech and that democratic, you know, feeling of the world offers me opportunities and I can expand my horizons. I can freely say and do, or at least have the opportunity to do what I want. Freely say how I think. I say that in the context that somehow the Georgian folks, my Georgian friends especially, are fighting like heck to maintain that freedom of speech, establish that freedom of speech here these days. And I think as I sort of send those notions home to Elizabeth, it's fascinating because she cannot envision herself in a situation that Georgia is in, fighting, because she's had the privilege of having that over the years in the United States.
Yes, and thank you very much for being here, because Georgia really, truly needs friends like you from the United States and the rest of the world. We need you because, you know, you support us, and we appreciate that. And if you could go back to 1995,
yes,
would you make the same decision, and why?
Yes, absolutely. Both my wife and had this incredible spiritual existence, and the why answer is, it's fascinating. It's almost why not. For us, it was an immediate, wow, this was given to us. I mean, you know, I'm not really a religious guy, neither is my wife, but this is a gift from God. or whoever is out there. This was somehow a beautiful fate for us to have happen. Will we make it again? Absolutely. Best decision we ever made in life, period.
Great. And Sid, well, thank you so much. And every interview that I'll conduct here at Bioli, I came up with an idea. We live in a different world. We live in a digital world, the world of AI.
Yes.
So I came up with an idea to have AI at the end of the interviews to generate a couple of questions.
Brilliant.
And we'll try and answer them. So first is, well, I just generated. When you look at our world today,
yes,
what makes you hopeful about the future, even in the face of global challenges?
What makes me hopeful about the future is the energy, the focus, and the ability to communicate that I feel from the young folks. Okay, the folks like myself, I will say it honestly, I mean, we kind of took a nap. We went to sleep, and the world changed while we were napping. And some things happened that are not very pleasant for today's environment. The young people, especially in Georgia, and I think it's going to catch on in the U.S. Even more so, aren't asleep. They're awake as heck. They realize what's going on. They're tied in. They're locked in. And my hope, and it's my strong belief, they're going to make it happen. They're going to change the world, and they're going to change it for the better.
And the second one is, when you think of kindness, is there a moment in your life that stands out?
So many moments. My parents taught me kindness. My mother was one of the kindest human beings you'd ever meet. She made sandwiches for the hobos. I think I've told you that before. She helped people in town. She gave them eggs. She gave them food. You know, whoever was needy, she took care of. Up until her dying day, she was taking care of older folks in her generation, taking them food, making them meals and the like. That's where it all started. But I got to tell you, it also exists today, because I came to Georgia and my next door neighbors were the kindest people I've met. They would cook me meals. They would take care of me. My wife knew to call them if she didn't, you know, she couldn't get a hold of me or something like that. Georgian hospitality, Georgian kindness is the best in the world. And again, I could go on and on, but a lot of my Georgian friends will ask me the aspect of, you know, why do I like the Georgian food? Why do I like so much the Georgian people? And it goes back to my childhood. Every time I have a Georgian meal of kupati or some of the fancier dishes, it reminds me of my childhood, honest to goodness. Anyway, there's a long-winded answer. But
and, you know, at the end, I have a question. You, with your decision in 1995, created sort of like a Georgian-American family. Mm-hmm. And what kind of Georgia and what kind of America you want to leave for your children and their children?
I'd like to leave a legacy here and in the U.S. and know that my grandchildren will live in a world that is free and of high moral standards. And I think there are enough people in the world, in Georgia, in the U.S. in particular, that will make that happen. The young folks get it. The older folks, not so much. So I leave that for them, and I hope that as part of my legacy, I can feel that I did whatever I could to make that happen as well. That's what I do here.
Let's keep that hope alive. Thank you very much.
Pleasure, my friend, pleasure.
It was great talking to you.
Thank you.